Front Range Community Radio, powered by volunteers who care about this region and helping others. KRFC 88.9 FM and streaming online at krfcfm.org.
Good evening. The time is 6:33. My name is Cindy. I'm one of the hosts of Critter Patter. Very happy to be back in the studio after being away in Australia for quite a while. So we're going to just jump right into it. First live show in quite some time with Kate Boyd, who is joining me here this evening. And you will have met Kate before because I have had her on. She belongs to the Northern Colorado Herpetological, is it Society?
It is.
It's a Herpetological Society, and she has a very valid reason for wanting to come on the show tonight. But before she gets into that, I want to have her tell you about, she is here with a couple of her coworkers, and they were doing an educational program today. So what were you doing?
Yeah, thanks so much for having us back on the show. And earlier today, we were out at an education program at a community preschool. So we were teaching our local community, all of the kiddos, all the students, about some of our animal ambassadors that we had with us. Some of the animals are native species as well, so we get to educate about our native animals and how our students can respect them in their spaces and be able to be better stewards towards our natural areas.
So because people get conditioned, like we grow up and you get conditioned inappropriately, to be afraid of snakes or be afraid of spiders or be afraid of other animals because they're going to hurt you or they're going to do bad things to you or do whatever. So how do you find when you have a sort of a blank slate with preschoolers, what is their reaction to the animal ambassadors that you bring to show them?
Yeah, and that's exactly what they are. It's a blank slate. A lot of those behaviors, that fear that we have instilled in us, a lot of it is really just learned behavior. So being able to get in front of these kiddos at a very young age and show them, these animals don't have to be scary, and be able to have them be familiar with them, especially like our snakes and those other animals that can give some folks the heebie-jeebies. These guys, it's really, really great for them to be able to experience them and kind of learn a little bit more about their behavior, and being able to experience something up close can help you to also care about it. And that's the first step in learning about the thing. That is the next step in actually being able to take care of that thing. So having folks interact with these animals up close, I really think creates a foundation for them moving forward to be able to care about these animals in our environment.
So what animal ambassadors did you bring with you? Like, walk us through kind of what you did in your program.
Yeah, so we brought 4 animal ambassadors with us today. We had a green iguana, an ornate box turtle, our native species. We also had a bearded dragon and a ball python. So some of these animals are kind of a little more common to see in captivity as pets. Some of them a little less so, like our iguana friend, who gets very, very large. Typically, they don't make great pets here in Colorado, but it's really great for us to have that diversity of different animals from different regions, different groups, and then our native species too. Highlighting those is always really great.
So when you bring these out to the kids, what's their first reaction? Do they kind of draw back, or are they more interested? They want to come up and touch them or pet them or get close to them?
It's definitely a big group reaction. So a lot of the time they kind of all follow each other, and most of the time it's a surge trying to get up close to the animal and say hi. They really want to see them up close and just see their faces and get interested in them. And a lot of these very younger kiddos, they're dealing with a lot of, they're learning about all of their senses. So being able to experience the animals and see them really up close, to pet some of them, and be able to get all those different senses kind of involved in that learning process, I think makes like a really big impact on them. And they do kind of, I would say the majority of them like to come up real close. They're very interested. There's no fear at all. So they're just very curious and want to be all up around those animals.
Well, it's such a wonderful program that you do, and I'm going to ask you towards the end of the program to let us know how other people that might want to have you guys do a program at their school or their business or wherever, how they can get in touch with you to do that. But just having these kids start out with a really good experience and not being afraid, because there's so many of these old wives' tales that kids are taught incorrectly. Mm-hmm. From an early age, about they're poisonous or they're this or they're slimy or they're whatever, and that they don't have to be subjected to all that misinformation, but can start from an early age and see these animals for what they are and learn about them correctly.
Exactly.
So you guys do a super good job, and you came onto the show tonight. In particular, tell us a little bit about the Colorado Gives program.
Yeah, so December 5th is Colorado Gives Day. So it's across the state, and it's early giving is started actually yesterday. So November 1st all the way through December 5th is early giving for Colorado Gives Day. And that program, Colorado Gives, is just a big incentive for folks to be able to support our local communities and our local nonprofits. So it's a big push for fundraising to help our local organizations in order for them to grow, to further their missions, and to help our community. And so we're participating in that this year. We're very excited. We have a goal of raising $10,000 between now and December 5th, and that is going to help us forward our mission to be able to grow into a bigger commercial facility where we can expand our rescue services, our shelter area for our rescues, as well as have an education classroom for the public to come and visit. We can do school field trips, we can do community education, and it will also help us forward our conservation goals too, of doing field surveys and research about some of our native species.
So tell people a little bit. So your goal is to raise $10,000 by the 5th of December for Colorado Gives. Give us a broad overview, because you do so much. You touched on a few things there: your rescue, your education, your preservation of native species and things like that. Go into a little bit more detail maybe about some of these programs that you're doing all the time. And I will remind people you are a nonprofit. So, you could really use whatever money you can get donated to you by the 5th of December. And tell us how that money gets used in your organization.
Yeah, and our organization, we are totally volunteer run, so any funds that we raise goes right back to all the animals that we care about, our reptiles and amphibians. So we specialize in those species, whether they be native species, wild animals, captive animals, or where a lot of them fall in between. There are a lot of animals that live in captivity that are, truly, they're wild animals. They're not domesticated like our dogs and cats. So we kind of bridge the gap of being able to educate the public not only about their care and proper husbandry of them in captivity, but also about our native species. So our education programs that we do via donation basis for our communities, we teach people about just all sorts of amazing species of reptiles and amphibians that live across the world, and our native ones too. So that ties into our education and conservation goals of being able to teach our community about what animals live around us, where they live in our ecosystems, and why they're important to have around. We also, with our rescue services, we are kind of like a little bit niche working with these reptiles and amphibians. There are so many different species out there that we work with and take into our care, and it can be hard for other like open admission shelters and larger places that deal with the majority just cats and dogs, to be able to know their specialized care. Over the past few years, we've worked with over 57 different species that have come into our care. So there's definitely a lot that goes into that, just in terms of figuring out what these animals need and the vast number of different species that we see in captivity in like the pet trade coming through our rescue, whether that's somebody who is moving and can't take their pet with them, or it's a financial situation, folks can no longer provide for their animals. We're here for them. So we're also providing a service for our community, being able to have a resource for people to bring these animals to us when they can no longer care for them. And that also helps with our conservation work and ties in there, because there are a lot of times where folks are faced with a really difficult decision. If they don't have the means to provide for their animal, what do? They can either surrender it to an appropriate organization, but if that organization's not around or there's capacity issues going on, people unfortunately choose to release those animals. And that can either be a death sentence for that particular animal, or it can lead to invasive species problems. So being able to take animals into our care and keep them in captivity and find them adoptive homes can also help our native species populations by preventing invasive species too.
So I hope people appreciate all the scope of what you just talked about, right? So for one small volunteer-run nonprofit organization, you not only do educational programs, you do conservation work within the realm of the rescue animals that you get as well. Mm-hmm. And just the rescue alone is such a significant service that you offer to northern Colorado, because reptiles and amphibians are very popular pets. But when people have to give them up or can't keep them, or for whatever reason, you're right, you can't just take it to the local animal shelter. They're not generally equipped to handle reptiles, amphibians, things of that sort. Some of these species can be very exotic. And so those animals are basically condemned to death if they can't be rescued and rehomed.
Right.
So you guys are actually filling that role as a specialist rescue organization amongst all of your other hats that you wear. But I think that's one of the ones that's just so important, because there is no other place for these animals to go if people can't keep them or must give them up.
Right.
So along that line, and we're gonna kind of bounce all over because my brain's bouncing in a bunch of different directions. So not only do you take in reptiles and amphibians that people can no longer keep, or maybe somebody found one injured somewhere in the wild and brought it, didn't know where else to take it. Of the animals that you take in and then eventually rehome, what have you got as far as adoptable reptiles or amphibians at the current time?
Yeah, right now we have about 18 different animals in our care that are through our rescue program. And we have some really amazing animals right now, and it's the perfect time to adopt. So we have quite a few bearded dragons in our care, some ball pythons, leopard geckos, a couple different turtle species as well, some other different varieties of gecko species. So we are kind of full up on a lot of the animals that we see pretty regularly coming in through our rescue are bearded dragons, ball pythons, leopard geckos, and those are animals that we generally consider are pretty good as in terms of like when people want to keep them in captivity. They tend to do well in homes with families, especially our bearded dragon friends. They're usually quite personable, kind of cuddly, very, very sweet. Definitely very dear to my heart. We have 5 bearded dragons in our care right now. 4 of them are available for adoption, looking for their homes, and they are so excited to find their families.
Well, it is that time of the year, and I normally don't encourage people to get pets at Christmas time without making plans. But so we're in November now, so if there are people listening that are thinking of a family member that would want a reptile or amphibian, you guys are perfectly placed to give them the information and help them set up the proper, because it should never be an impulse decision. You have to make sure that you can provide a good home for this reptile or amphibian. You have the proper facility for it. You have the proper housing and lighting and all of the food requirements that they require. But so with that said, someone who's looking to get a reptile or amphibian for Christmas or for the holiday season, you guys would be a very good place to start out, because you are able to ensure that that animal is going to a proper environment, and you can help educate them if they are lacking in terms of how to care for it. So why don't you give us your contact information for people that are listening now? And if you just tuned in, you're listening to Critter Patter on 88.9 KRFC Fort Collins. My name is Cindy, and I'm speaking with Kate Boyd from the Northern Colorado Herpetological Society. How can people get in touch with your organization?
Yeah, people, if anybody's interested in education programs, maybe adopting an animal, or they need help with rescue services for their own animal, finding us online at nocohs.org or on Facebook, Instagram, social media at @nocohs.